about the Community Energy Group was when we did our South Hill Parish Plan. That was some years ago now, and we asked everybody in the parish for their opinions, and at that time 92% of us thought that a Community Energy Group was a good idea. But that was some years ago. A unit of electricity back then would have cost less than 10 pence, and people weren't that bothered. But now, some years on, a unit of electricity is a bit more than 15 pence, and everybody's talking about energy costs. So, in a moment, we have with us today Neil Farrington from Community Energy Plus, and also here is Jonathan and Hayley, who have been answering your questions about energy, and they'll be here after this presentation to talk about your own individual problems and what we can do as a community group. And they work for Community Energy Plus, which is a Cornish charity. They've quite a bit of experience in setting up other community energy groups in Cornwall. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Neil.
Hi there. I did have a nice presentation for you today, but we've got a projector. So I'm going to do quite a bit of talking. There's nothing to distract you, unfortunately. But really what I want to do is give you a bit of information on what's happening with community energy schemes, what it means, what some of the opportunities are, and talk a bit about what other people are doing across Cornwall. And then really what we're hoping to take out today, to see whether there's enough people interested locally in potentially creating a local energy cooperative and developing some of your own projects. And then again, I'll give you a good idea of what those are beforehand. And also, if people are happy with it, collect some of your contact details, and then I can share materials with you that I wasn't able to show you. And equally, we can then inform you if anything moves forward in terms of developing ideas locally. So just to give you a bit of background, as David mentioned, I work for Community Energy Plus. So we've been operating in Cornwall since 1997, mainly delivering projects that reduce carbon emissions. So we do lots of insulation schemes for houses, we do fuel poverty work with vulnerable groups of people, and I particularly focus on renewable energy schemes. So I'm going to talk quite a bit about renewables today, giving you an idea of what they can do for you in terms of reducing emissions, providing a local energy supply, but equally what it opens up in terms of possibilities with the revenue it generates. Renewables can actually generate a decent level of income now. If you develop a scheme individually, that financial benefit can go back to yourself. If you develop it as a broader community energy scheme, it means that income can actually be directed into the parish itself, and can actually be a long-term income stream that enables you to look at other ideas, other ambitions you've got in the parish plan, and really to plan a lot better further into the future. These are 20-year income streams you're potentially securing that can really change the way you're working. So I'm going to just flick to this to reference. Now, different renewables have different returns. Depending on what schemes you look at developing, whether it's solar on someone's roof, solar on a community building such as this one, solar thermal into people's homes, woodshed biomass, heat pump installations, these all now create a financial return through the feed-in tariff. The feed-in tariff pays you for producing renewable electricity, and something called the Renewable Heat Incentive. It's actually open now for community and non-domestic installations. It actually opens up to houses in the spring as well. Now, to give you an idea on the types of returns you could be looking at, solar thermal installation on a house could produce a return of about 8%. When you get into larger scale wind turbines, there's a good example outside that I saw earlier, you're up in the region of 25-30% returns on any money that comes in. Now that's obviously a considerable financial return. You can receive that money as a parish and use it, and that's really what we wanted to focus on today.
Sorry, is that 25% per year?
Yes.
So we're looking at 2 years later?
Yes, not less. You can see where some of the incentives come to install large installations. And one of the things we look to do in the parish is work with you to actually try and identify projects that you thought were reasonable, that you think are suitable, that you think doesn't have too many detrimental impacts in the area. We would then look at actually developing them realistically in terms of planning demands, requirements to get them permitted, opening up for investment. All the returns would obviously be based on those particular installations. But it's just to give you an idea, there's quite a lot of finance you can potentially play with now. And that's why we can do lots of different things with cooperatives and share out the benefits much more broadly. And there's also quite a lot of benefits of a cooperative approach to energy use. Clearly people are experiencing cost rises in terms of the supply you have. In the near future we're likely to have problems with the actual supply itself. Now clearly if you can start to generate in your local area, actually earn that generation, you have much better control of where the future's going, both in terms of costs and actually having this supply available. It's also very much about local empowerment. This is not ourselves coming forward as a commercial developer, deciding I'm going to put a wind farm outside on the field, and then talking to you about getting involved. We want to do it very much from the beginning. So you're the ones that decide what projects we actually look at. You're the ones that decide what you think is suitable and viable. Which is why it's important to have as many people involved as possible in the cooperatives to start with. I won't go into planning too much at the moment. It is quite critical to see your parish plan or any neighbourhood planning you're looking at. But there are clear national policy guidelines now that we need decentralised energy, that each community should actually be looking to take responsibility for their own energy generation. And they're also supporting community-led initiatives. So in terms of the risks associated with getting planning permission for any of these developments, you're much more likely to be successful as a cooperative now. When the Cornwall local plan eventually comes out, looks like it's going to be another year or two now, and that's going to include a lot of key elements about communities actually generating their own renewable energy. I don't know if people have been aware of neighbourhood plans, but they're very much about having positive strategies for renewable energy development. It's not a case in the planning policy framework that you can just decide you don't want renewables and you don't want them here and you don't want them to happen. That very much runs contradictory to planning. Now, the best way to deal with neighbourhood planning is to decide where you want those renewables to go. Then you actually have control of what's developed in your local area. And whether that's to do with housing or renewables or any of the other subjects in the neighbourhood plan, unless you actually get involved in trying to determine something yourself, you're left with very general policies, which is one of the reasons we have quite a lot of installations that got dotted around quite randomly, because there's no strategic approach at the moment. You could actually take control of that yourselves as a parish. The other critical thing to think about in terms of these community energy schemes and how we raise the finance, it can be completely owned by the community. I'm going to talk a bit more about share offers and local investment in a minute. Essentially, each of these projects obviously needs finance to have them developed, whether it's insulating a house or putting a turbine up. There's different ways you can raise the finance. We've been working quite closely with Cornwall Council to try and create some finance streams that essentially retain all the economic benefit in the county. Now you can do it by getting local people involved, get them investing in the schemes. We've also created a county-wide loan fund that's in place at the moment, just for community energy projects in the county. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. As long as you're investing locally, or you're potentially borrowing money, you retain all the ownership of those installations. But I will talk about another couple of options in terms of taking private equity investment. So we work with a Cornish investor up at Rock that invests in solar installations we've got into community buildings. The buildings benefit from all the energy, they benefit from the finance it generates, and where you sort of sit on that pendulum of ownership is very dependent on how much you can actually raise yourselves. I haven't got any magical answers today that means I've got a massive wedge of money I can just sort of throw at you to use, so it does have to be secured through these different routes. Just to give you a bit of an idea of some of the activity going on across Cornwall at the moment, we're currently working with 16 different energy cooperatives. Now, some of these are villages or towns, parishes, some of them are clusters of parishes that have all basically set up to look at their energy use in the area, look at the best ways they can possibly reduce it through insulating people's homes, talking to people about how they can use less energy in their lives, in their behaviour, really dropping down the demand they have for a parish. You're left with a figure that determines how much power you need in your parish. And the process we go through is then to try and match that with local generation. And again, that could be a whole raft of technologies and different solutions, ideally the ones that are appropriate to your area. So one of the first exercises we may go through if the co-op moves forward is actually to look at the resources you have, where it's sunny, where it's windy, if you've got any hydro resources. Have a look at your properties. Is it possible to insulate them, or is there conservation areas in existing buildings? and try and come up with some tailored solutions that are pertinent to where you live. And obviously you're the best people to help us decide what the most appropriate solution is. Stuff going on, people may have heard stuff up in Weybridge. There's a group called Ren up there that have been doing lots of engagement work. We're working with the group up at Launceston, who's working down in Rain, Falmouth, Truro, West Cornwall. Really starts to pop up all over the place, and hopefully this could be the start of something happening in South. Equally, I'm sort of aware you've got a relatively small parish in terms of the houses involved. I don't know if it's worthwhile thinking of potentially clustering with another parish, but that's another possibility. It could just be Southfield or Camel, the name of the parish if it makes sense. And again, we look for you to decide whether that's viable or not. And some parishes are closest to others, and some may get on with all decisions to be made. I'm just going to talk to you a bit now about a particular cooperative that I'm involved with. Back in 2008, I set up something called Community Power Cornwall. But essentially it's about encouraging local ownership. So we worked with community down in Gorham, with the local school, parish council, a number of local residents. We developed a wind turbine project, so there's 2 endurance turbines. I think this may be the one that's near the church, but I haven't actually seen it. So we're about 34-35 metres in terms of scale. So there's 2 turbines that now sit in that parish. They provide 20% of the parish's electricity demand, and they're actually owned by 100 members of the local community. So they are wind turbines, they do look the same, but all the money they generate goes back to people who live nearby. So in terms of the impact on them, the influence on their life, the fact they drive past it and see it, obviously you can quite drastically change perceptions. If you're driving past the dam, the turbine's moving much quicker, great, that means I get more money into my bank. That's quite different to the current situation where you may not get any benefit at all from those installations that you have to drive past every day. So it's a really way of changing the way the projects are set up, and hopefully that then influences people's perceptions. And again, this is very much open about what you want to develop. It could be that we look at heat pumps on some of the houses, solar panels on some of the buildings. I just learned you haven't got a pump, but any other facilities you have in the area, we could look at renewable installations there. It could be that we do lots of different things all across the parish, or we go for one big project. I'm not going to suggest the big wind turbine, because I know people have got quite strong feelings about the one down the road. But potentially when you get to that scale of turbine, you could be powering 1,000 or 2,000 houses. So again, it would be for you to decide, do you want to do one big thing, or lots of little things, or a mix of the 2. And again, this is all completely open. We don't have any project ideas as it stands. That would be one of the first stages we go through, as I mentioned earlier. See what you've got in the local area, see what seems a good idea to develop, then try and work up some relationships with landowners, and see what people are going forward with. Again, at every stage through that process, we look to engage more people. So once a firm idea comes forward, we can then open it back out to the parish and get people's feedback on it. There may obviously be some conflicts along the way as well, but hopefully as a community you can try and work together to actually make it as acceptable as possible.
Can I just ask a question?
Yes.
If somebody was to have a means to generate electricity on the land as part of a community project, what are the ramifications for that landowner regarding when they want to sell up or whatever?
Yeah, different ways of doing it. We're doing quite a lot with landowners at the moment. Some installations we have where the landowner just gets a rent. So essentially the turbine may go up in the field and gets a direct rent from it. We have some other projects we're doing as joint ventures. So the landowner owns sort of 70% of the project, and the other 30% is opened up for local investment into the scheme. Certainly in terms of selling on property, it just gets written into the contract that that installation is part of that asset when it goes forward. So it's registered with the land registry, and then we move forward with any sale we make. Now, in my experience, that's not usually a problem, because essentially whoever buys up your farm has an income stream and potentially a cheap supply of electricity as well. Obviously that again would be different with different types of installations. You can always write in buyout clauses. So there's an opportunity for the landowner to decide in 10 years, right, he doesn't want to carry on the arrangement, he'll have to pay a certain amount to the cooperative in lieu of any lost income going forward. So there's a few different contractual ways you can deal with it essentially. But what you should be doing is adding value to your farm, your land, your business, and having that generation on site, so it should be a positive thing.
Thank you.
Can I, you mentioned the one scheme where the community got 20% of their energy. And how is that actually done? Doesn't it just go into the national grid?
It does go into the grid at the moment. Yeah, what we can do is look at the demand you actually have. So we can't match it live in terms of time for the moment, although there's some very interesting possibilities. What it's really doing is trying to set some sort of target, so you know how much energy you're using. There's then the opportunity for everybody to get involved to reduce that as much as possible, which then means you need less renewable generation, which is quite a neat way of people thinking about their use across the area. There are some much more practical solutions coming in terms of storage and things as well. Most aren't directly available at the moment, but a lot of the talk at the moment is about smart generation and smart cooling program and smart grids, where potentially you can end up isolating an area of the national grid. So you provide the electricity to your parish and the grid within it, but you certainly need to build in some storage capacity at that point. So whether you look at battery generation or compressed air, you're looking at some quarry sites in terms of pump storage, so that would be critical to actually detach yourself from the natural grid and be truly sustainable.
So how far along the line is that? Is that a long way?
It's quite a long way down the line. Things are moving fairly quickly because obviously at the commercial level this is a massive new market. The big multinational players looking at finding a solution for the grid. Some are fairly simple. I mean, compressed air is compressed air. You pump it into a sealed area and you release it when you need it. Pump storage again is relatively simple. Probably more the discussions about how you detach from the national grid and get away from this sort of centralised energy mechanism that we're used to at the moment. Weybridge did actually have a bid into the Low Carbon Network Fund recently, where they were going to trial detaching Weybridge from the national grid and actually using their excess renewables generation to produce methane. To produce hydrogen and put it into the mains gas network, so then reduce the carbon content of the gas use in the area. So again, a lot of these solutions are very relevant to the areas and what solutions are available there. And certainly that's something we look at in terms of moving forward with the scheme. Something depending on the physical assets, but there's other solutions.
So at the moment it's mainly about payment.
Yeah, it's about controlling the money attached to that generation. It's what you can do with it and how you can use it. So it could be you have a set amount of income, you choose to send a cheque to everybody in the parish and reduce their energy bills through that route, or you choose to use the money to install heat pumps on vulnerable people's homes so they get a cheaper use of electricity. Actually, the revenue the system's generated through the renewable heat incentives goes back into this community fund. So it's about taking control of lots of those things. I was just going to say, I'm happy for questions. I'll go through if anything else.
Sorry, could I just ask, you said that if someone puts a wind turbine up on their land, they would get 70% and the community would get 30%.
That's just one example of...
Yeah, and you're also saying that the community would get 20% of their income back. Is that 70%? Is it 30% or 20%? Or is it...
No, we have a 30% stake in the project.
Yeah.
And for that finance we put into that 30% stake, we get 20% return on our investment.
You get 20% return on the
Yeah.
investment.
These are very much tailored to the actual installation. Yeah, it's not a set model. There are a couple of examples of other projects we're running. We're doing other projects with landowners where we own 100% of the generation and we just pay them by land rental fee. There's just different ways of doing it, essentially.
I see. Thank you.
Yeah, there's no set answer really. So I was just talking about Goran there, just giving you an example of what we're doing in terms of the investors. We currently pay a 5 to 7% return on local people's investment in that scheme. So it's a fairly decent return in comparison to leaving your money in the bank or any savings you're earning at the moment. What you need to do is try and reach a nice balance, which is essentially we pay a return back to the investors in the project, and then all the surpluses go into more development. So in terms of your parish scheme, you would be the ones deciding what we need to offer people to get them to invest. And that essentially balances out the surplus income you would have available to do other works in the parish. Again, I wouldn't get too bogged down in the numbers, because what hopefully we do moving forward is find some sites, find some options, cost them up, and we can talk about returns that are actually relevant to specific installations in your area.
So who would get the difference on a large scale project?
whoever owns it, which in the case I'm talking about would be the cooperative.
So if the parish could afford to put all the money in and buy, I don't know, £1 million, 100, whatever, for a wind turbine, then they would pay for it and everything. And if it was their own land, council land, parish land,
Yeah.
then they would get all the income back from it.
Yeah.
And there's from that down to, I don't know, 5% of, 20% of.
It's all very specific to the schemes.
Could I just ask you once more? You said that the 20% would go to the 30% of the people.